Welcome back, dear listeners, to the hidden corridors of spectral margins, where yesterday's sins are tomorrow's hauntings. I am your faithful curator, Lucius Voss, beckoning you once more into the dim spaces where regret rots, secrets fester, and the living carry burdens the dead refuse to shoulder. Tonight, we drift between two troubled pasts, stories of homes built on crumbling lies and remedies brewed in red-stained hope. First, we visit a place where the family tree bears poisoned fruit. In Tainted Secrets and Properties, we meet Emmett, a man called home to witness the final breaths of a father he barely recognizes. Yet death, as it often does, demands confession. And Emmett learns that some inheritances are not written in wills, but in the blood-soaked soil beneath our feet. Prepare yourself. Some truths are not whispered across a deathbed. They are howled through the cracks in the floorboards. And now, Tainted Secrets and Properties, written by N.M. Brown. I was getting ready to make love to my wife Samantha when the call came. A most inopportune time to learn that your father's dying. Then again, is there ever an appropriate time for that sort of thing? He had started showing signs of dementia in his early 60s. In some ways, I began grieving him the moment we got the diagnosis, so I was somewhat prepared for the end to come. Dad's body has been an empty husk for almost 7 years. His mind had transcended to the afterlife long ago. Growing up on a farm, certain things were instilled in me from birth, one of which being that one of the worst things you could do to a loved one would be to put them in a nursing home. The second, and most important, was that my father wanted to die at home on the land he had put so much of his life into. Which brings us to our third piece of wisdom my father ingrained into my soul. He would say, "This farm lives and dies with me, Emmett. I'm not going to leave it to you after I'm gone. I want you to go to college. Make something of your life. College is the most important thing, son. You either work hard to get through school and finish, or you work hard breaking your back for the rest of your life." That's exactly what I did. Years of Ivy League schooling had allowed me to live the kind of life where I could afford to hire live-in home health care for Dad. The smell of wet, fetid hay consumed me the moment I stepped foot out of the car. Ashamedly, it had been 2.5 years since I'd been home, and I forgot just how thick the air was. A feeling washed over me that brought memories creeping out of the corners I had done so well at keeping them hidden in. My father lay on his deathbed, the most fragile I'd ever seen him. He was sunk into the middle of his white linen-laden mattress, as if it were slowly swallowing him whole, inch by inch. I took his hand as I gently sat at his bedside. He was awake, and his eyes looked frantically at me through labored breaths. Emmett, I, I need to tell you something, he croaked between coughs. I looked to his nurse concernedly.
These will be the last moments you spend with your father. Sometimes patients have experiences of great clarity at the end of their lives. Don't let him leave this world with a burdened soul.
She nodded her head softly as she spoke. Maddie, he continued, you need to know the truth about Maddie. God won't accept my soul with loving arms after what I've done. Your mother, Myrna, will have to live in heaven without me. Maddie was my older sister. She disappeared when I was 6 and was a somewhat forbidden subject in our household. I have no memories of her other than that Mom and Dad telling me that she was very sick, which is why she lived in the barn. They made me swear to stay away from there because if I went near her, I'd get sick too. Children around town started going missing. My parents fed my assumption that Maddie was one of them. Your sister was born all wrong, broken of body and mind. Myrna was kicked in the stomach by a calf when she was 6 months pregnant. We were relieved when she didn't lose the baby, but it never occurred to us that there would be defects from the event. My father wheezed. Dad, I interrupted, if this is too much, you don't have... Quiet, boy, my father demanded, his face shaking with the effort of assertion. I went to town to pick up a grain order. When I came back, Myrna wasn't in the house. I had no idea where to find her until I heard the screams. She'd gone into labor inside the barn. By the time I got back, Maddie had been born. A mottled mess of lumpy tissue and veins. We raised her in the barn among the shit, mire, and muck she was born in. He paused long enough for the nurse to come and give him some medicine, something for the pain, no doubt. We tried to get you together to play when you were a toddler. You erupted into hysterics the second you saw her face. The way she looked at you concerned us, so Myrna and I made the heart-wrenching decision to raise you separately, convinced it was best for all. We were wrong, son. Dad grimaced. Kids started disappearing when you were about 5 years old, probably too young to remember. At this point, my father started to stutter his words. Tears brimmed over his lower lids and tunneled down his paper-thin cheeks. One night, I heard screaming coming from the barn, similar to those I heard the night Maddie was born. The sight that greeted me is burned into my core for eternity. Your sister, she had been the one taking the kids. I found her with her palm smashed through a little boy's face. She had been the one screaming, shouting through sobs. She had only wanted a friend, not to be lonely anymore. The gravity of his words hit my stomach like a wrecking ball, causing me to run to the sink and gag up my lunch. His final words ring through my ears to this very day. I killed your sister to save her and countless other children. She's wrapped up in your mother's wedding dress, buried under the floorboards of the barn, like the wasted soul that she was. That was Tainted Secrets and Properties, written by a soul unafraid to lift the floorboards of memory. Some family heirlooms are best left buried. But the hour grows darker still. Our second tale draws us into a different web of horror, one woven from kindness and miracles, and from the red, sticky price of small town salvation. In the Mrs. Biddlespatch special, an old legend resurfaces. A woman whose soap healed the town's children, cured the incurable, and masked the horror best left unspoken. Nostalgia can be a dangerous perfume, my friends. Sometimes the sweet smell you cling to is just rot in disguise. Bathe if you must, scrub if you dare, but some stains are born from the marrow. And here is the Mrs. Biddlespatch special, written by N.M. Brown. Flashes of lightning illuminated torrents of rain as they ran down our bedroom window like tiny waterfalls, lulling my wife Meryl and I into a contented slumber. We always seemed to sleep our best during the muffled maelstrom of a Florida storm, but no amount of sleep, however deep, could block out my wife's anxieties. A sort of ESP, I called it. She shot up in bed, a severed spiderweb of drool clinging to the corner of her mouth and chin. "What is it?" I murmured, groggily, startled by her sudden departure from her usual resting place across my chest. My wife looked toward her cell phone on the bedside table just as it started to ring.
Meryl? Oh my god, I'm losing my fucking mind.
My sister-in-law, Debbie, sobbed through the telephone speaker. The intensity of her voice cut through my sleep-addled brain like a circular saw. It always fascinated me how much she and my wife sounded alike on the telephone.
Derek won't sleep. The bumps are worse than ever now. They started out as small patches on his shoulders, and within 8 months they've spread to his entire torso, front and back. Oh my god, that's horrible.
My wife said sympathetically.
What did the doctors say? I've asked them to test him for a gluten allergy a dozen times. They won't take it seriously. His doctor said she doesn't want to subject him to tests unless she absolutely has to because he's so young. Meanwhile, my sweet baby boy is turning into a goddamned prickly pear. And what's worse is, the stress is affecting my health. I've been tired all the time, sick to my stomach. I've woken up with anxiety sickness almost every day for the past 3 weeks. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do, Meryl. Between Derek's condition and my body's bullshit, I feel like we're both just falling apart.
I ran my hand over my shoulders, letting their conversation fade into the inaudible as the floodgates worth of memories hit me from my own childhood. I remembered my mother working her nerves up over a skin problem I had that sounded very similar to Derek's, along with the Mrs. Biddlespatch special. Mrs. Biddlespatch was slightly before my time, a legend born during the youth of my parents. She lived in a small cottage-style house at the corner of town that was closest to the river. It sat at the end of a winding dirt road, almost as if God had thrown it there, the trajectory forging a path through the trees, debris and brush that stood in the way. The lot that it sat on was overgrown with bushes, weeds, and vines, but she seemed happy just the same. Miss Biddlespatch had always been the friendliest person I'd ever come across in our own backward one-horse town. She kept a clean home and crafted beautiful things full of love and soul. She kept house just as a mother or homemaker would, though she had neither husband nor children. God knows she sure would have made a fine example of either of those titles, but I assumed it just wasn't in the cards for her. For all I knew at the time, she may not have even wanted to be in love or motherhood. Not all people who seem alone are lonely, after all. Anyway, the point is, the way that she came to be a figure included in my family growing up, for a time at least, was through her handmade soap. These days, they have almost everything that you can imagine. Hemp soap, olive oil, goat milk, black soap, and lathers, red, soap made with flowers, soap made with tea herbs, mango soap, soap that smells like bacon, you name it. But back when I was a kid, you didn't usually see any of that stuff. You had your standard dish, laundry, and body soap. You got 3 of 4 colors with even fewer scent options. You wouldn't find any blueberry almond scented Dawn with aromatherapy benefits on the corners of our sinks. You got the yellow orangey shit, and you liked it. Once in a while, on occasion, you'd see the green stuff, but most of it was Neutrogena amber colored. You get my point. Well, Mrs. Biddelspatch's soap was different. It was gorgeous, crisp white with crimson red swirls. It held all the allure of tie-dye before the boom of the 1970s brought it forth in Technicolor. And the smell? Oh, the smell was wonderful. It didn't smell like a field of flowers or a dance club rapist. It was earthy and robust. It had the underlying scent of cleaners, so you know it did the job. But it left you smelling wholesome, if that makes sense. No 2 people that bathed with it smelled the same. It was like it brought out a sweetness to the natural essence of one's already contained. Do you know how sometimes when people die, their loved ones will smell their clothes long after they're gone? Some even go as far as to seal them in airtight bags or sealed containers to keep it from fading over time. It wasn't their perfume or cologne, it was them. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Those weren't the only distinguishable benefits either. It also, and I swear to God this is true, cured most any dermatological ailment that a young child could develop. Mothers across the majority of the entire town swore by its use, with testimonials ringing from laundry soap and pet dander allergies to the most extreme cases of diaper rash to eczema and beyond. My epidermal demon appeared when I was only a few months old. A smattering of strawberry-colored marks ran across my cheeks, mouth, and chin. My parents initially thought it was wind rash due to me being born weeks before one of the most brutal winters of the state of West Virginia had seen during my parents' lifetimes. However, it soon presented itself on the bottom of my neck as well as the tops of my shoulders. Only now it had evolved into tiny, braille-like dots. The pediatrician my mother took me to couldn't figure out what was wrong exactly, but that doesn't mean she didn't try. Children absorb more than most people realize. A parent, a teacher, or doctor's body language, mannerisms, and tone can be read by a child almost effortlessly, long before any school book. So, when the doctor and my mother loomed over me with worried expressions asking if my tummy hurt, I nodded. To regain some semblance of personal space and control back in the situation, if nothing else. That one little nod subjected me to several weeks of torture that I'm thankful to hardly be able to remember now. The doctor sat across the table from my mother as she wrung her hands with fretful obsession, making the tension in the air that much more tangible as she waited for a diagnosis. She looked my mother straight in the eyes and said, "Celiac disease." I spent the next 23 days doing blood trials, my mother called them. They placed me on a variety of diets, with each change in menu item resulting in another round of blood work. I had been stuck more times than a spinster's pincushion by the time that summer was through. And what's worse, my parents' insurance company was beginning to give her and my father a hard time. All the while, the bumps continued to spread. By the time I turned 4 years old, they had stopped mere inches above my elbows and covered most of my upper back. In the end, it didn't matter what the hell I ate. One day, in line at the pharmacy while picking up one of my many prescriptions that didn't do a damn thing, Mom ran into one of her old coworkers. She said she hadn't seen in ages. I had certainly never seen him before. Well, the fellow told her about the soap, called it the Mrs. Biddlespatch Special. He performed quite a spiel, so effective in fact that my mother got right out of the line and headed over to the address the man had given her. Her eyes were wild driving over the hills and dips of that old dirt road. At the time, I thought they were burning with the flames of hope, but thinking back on it, it very well may have been fear that placed that look there. I remember her saying in later years that she almost turned back. I'm forever thankful that she didn't. From that point on, from that very first bar of soap, my skin was as smooth as a normal baby's ass. There were no more needles or doctor's visits, no more being forced to dress in high-collared and long-sleeved shirts. My mother bought tank tops for me for the first memorable time in my life. Things took a turn for the better, and it gave my mother the confidence to overcome great things. including my father's suicide. With all the good she was doing for the children of these families, I often wondered why she didn't sell her products to stores, pharmacies, and pediatricians' offices, and I certainly wasn't the only one. Young parents and nurses in training must have asked her at least thrice a month. Whenever asked, she would simply say that the best kind of love came in small batches and how industrialization and consumerism ruined everything. I'd been so wrapped up in nostalgia that I hadn't realized Meryl had gotten off the phone. Her right hand was at her mouth, frantically chewing on any scrap of nail she could get a hold of on her already bitten down fingertips. I recognized this as something she did in extreme times of stress. Oh boy, I thought to myself. Here we go. What now? I asked, a bit more aggressive than I'd meant to. It was the middle of the night. I was tired, you know.
Debbie is pregnant again. She just found out yesterday, almost 10 weeks along.
Oh, Christ, Meryl. That's the last thing she needs. Does she even want the baby? I swear, I've never seen a grown woman make so many children. I stopped upon seeing the look of hurt on my wife's face. My apologies, I muttered. Please, continue.
Well, fuck, Jerry. No, she doesn't want the baby. You know carrying it to term will destroy her back.
She replied fretfully. She then raised a hand and began ticking off statements on her fingers as if it were a grocery list.
So now, she's alone because her husband took off. God knows who this new baby belongs to.
She drew a finger down into the center of her palm, leaving 4 remaining.
She barely makes enough to support one kid, rent, gas, and everything else to live.
The second finger dropped to join the first.
The kid living out of utero is turning into a living reptile.
The third finger fell.
She can't work because of her back. The list goes on and on.
My mind drifted back to Mrs. Biddlespatch and the day she disappeared from our lives. I remember walking in the front door after getting off the school bus during my 4th grade year. Our house, which usually held the smell of cooked dinner in the air, was empty and cold that day. My mother sat at our kitchen table, bleary-eyed over a half-empty bottle of gin.
Jerry, listen to me. You are not to see or talk to Mrs. Biddelspatch anymore. Do you understand me?
Her tone wavered with the threat of oncoming tears that somehow still managed to hold firm. At the time, my young mind couldn't grasp any comprehension of why she would want to keep me away from this sweet old lady, one that had helped our family so much over the years. I could hear my mother and stepfather discussing it later on that evening, long after she had already put me to bed.
She's lucky I haven't called the fucking cops,
My mother hissed. Her angered breaths quickly melted to sobs before she continued on.
Poor Jerry. My poor sweet baby boy.
My stepfather, David's boots made booming sounds, clanking across the kitchen floor as he walked to my mother's side. I pictured him placing a hand on her shoulder, something he was well known to do. As he spoke, "Jerry will be just fine, Lee," he soothed. "This really is none of our business. we were just fine before we found out, and we will be just fine after." He paused a moment, letting my mother's sobs consume the kitchen. "Jesus Christ, sweetheart, what in God's name did you see over there anyway?" Her wails grew louder, and I heard her stifle a gag. "Damn it, baby girl, why won't you tell me?" I knew that if my mother wanted me to stop doing something, nothing could get in her way, not even my own sheer willpower and defiance. I kept thinking of her at home, sitting all alone in the empty house. She'd never had children, and to my knowledge, I was the closest thing that fit the bill. Pain bloomed in my chest to imagine her thinking she had done something wrong to make me abandon her. I'd always felt a closeness to the woman, but I never understood why. Not until later on, at least. Life moved faster than I'd liked it to, and before long, I was living on my own. I'd lost several of my memories of Mrs. Biddlespatch and childhood comforts, replacing them with things more appropriate for my age, such as smoking pot, gaming, and getting girls. I'd almost forgotten her completely. I'm ashamed to admit that all changed one Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on my futon, stoned out of my gourd, when my phone began to ring. An involuntary groan escaped my lips as I recognized my mother's number on the caller ID. I cleared the rattled bits of phlegm that had settled in my chest after a morning's worth of smoking before picking up the phone. "Hey, Mom," I grumbled. "You doing all right?"
Hi, Jer. Listen, you will never guess what I heard today.
She chattered. The manner in which she had said it left me wondering if she was concerned or excited. "Well, I don't know, Ma. If it was about me, I assure you it isn't true," I joked, holding my free hand up in defense despite the fact that she wasn't able to see it.
Haha, very funny.
She quipped.
No, my friend Martha told me that poor Mrs. Biddlespatch had a bad fall last week. They housed her in a rehab center until she's well enough to go home again. Can you believe it? She's hardly 10 years older than I am.
My mother exclaimed woefully. "Biddlespatch?" I murmured. That sounds familiar. Biddlespatch. Wait, she was the lady that made the soap.
That's right,
she confirmed. "Whatever happened to make you so mad at her anyway? She hit on David or something?" I joked, though carefully. David had become sick earlier in life than he should have. We had no idea how much longer he'd be around. It worried me at times so much that I did my best to avoid thinking about it. I kept it folded up and tucked away tight in a pocket that lay deep in the part of my stomach where dread was born. My joke was met with silence on the other end of the line. Hello? Mom? Did I lose you?" She drew in a long breath, signaling that she was mentally preparing for whatever it was she was about to say.
No, I'm here, sweetie. I'm here.
She trailed off. "Okay, good. I thought we got disconnected. Anyway, as I was saying, I used to go over there all the time, even on holidays most years. Then suddenly, one day, it all just stopped. I pressed on, hoping for a better answer than the heavy sighs I was currently receiving. That's when she finally broke down, telling me everything that I thought I wanted to know. According to my mom, after a few years of faithful use, she began to notice a problem pattern with the soap. Some of the batches she made held more of a pink tint than anything else, almost as if they came from the leftovers, the scrapings from the bottom of a forgotten batch. The smell wasn't as strong, and the effects seemed even less so. The redder, the better, she'd always say. Well, she said that one day she dropped by Mrs. Biddlespatch's house unexpectedly, just a random thought that popped in her head on the way home from work. There was no answer from within the house. However, the front door was unlocked. She could have sworn she heard muffled, agonized whimpers coming from somewhere towards the back of the house, so she let herself inside. She followed the sound, gasping upon opening the door to the room it was coming from. I remember my mother shuddering in horror as she explained the scenes she came across. My mother found Mrs. Biddlespatch writhing in pain on her bathroom floor. The entire interior of the woman's master bedroom and bathroom was bathed in a pristine white. Everything from the paint to the fixtures and accessories. Half of the floor, tub, and bottom of the toilet was speckled with heavy ribbons of crimson, reminding her of the very soap she likely made there. Mrs. Biddlespatch clutched at her stomach while rolling into a ball. The entire hem of her nightdress was drenched in shades of sickly browns and reds. She had pulled it up past her knees as she lay there, exposing mottled chunks of red that had collected in a metal tray between her knees. It had all the makings of a miscarriage or at-home abortion gone wrong. But my mother had never seen any men enter or leave the house in all the times she'd been there. There were no smiling pictures of her in a gentleman's arms on the walls. The title of Mrs. indicated that at one point there was a Mr., but she'd never mentioned him, and we certainly never asked. It didn't feel right to bring up the subject that could possibly cause pain or discomfort to someone that had brought so much peace to our lives. The largest of miracles can come from the smallest of things, like a simple bar of soap. My mother ran to her side, offering to call an ambulance, a gesture that Mrs. Biddlespatch vehemently refused. She told my mother her discomfort was almost at an end and that it was perfectly normal for what she was going through. The woman did, however, allow her to stay until she felt strong enough to make it safely into her own bed. And that's exactly what my mother did. According to Mom, once Mrs. Biddlespatch was safely tucked in bed, she began to clean the bathroom. Mrs. Biddlespatch screamed in terror when she saw my mother walking towards the trash bin with a metal tray. My mother apologized immediately, assuming the woman she'd come to love so much had planned to bury the remains. But just as Mom was leaving the room, Mrs. Biddlespatch, in and out of pain, said something very unusual. She told my mother to put it in the side room with the others. To this day, she's never told me or anyone else exactly what she saw inside that room. All I know is my mother ran out of there screaming, came home, sat at the kitchen table, and began to drink. She said that Mrs. Biddlespatch confided in her through bouts of pain and consciousness that she had been diagnosed with a unicornuate uterus, making full-term pregnancy almost impossible. For a woman with her condition to have a pregnancy last longer than 4 months was a divine miracle. Mom said Mrs. Biddlespatch kept muttering about giving back to the community and the healing power of stem cells. 1 week later, after several more distraught phone calls from Debbie, I decided to listen to what my gut had been screaming all along. I sat Meryl down and told her everything, all the details that I knew of, at least. Mrs. Biddlespatch certainly couldn't produce her own ingredients to make the soap. No, she was far too old for that now. However, what she could do was teach me how to make it, and as horrifying as it is, I believe I know just where to get everything I need to make it. I looked to Meryl, consumed with dread and horror as my fingers willed themselves to dial the numbers one by one. I knew that once I completed this call, there would be no going back. Call your sister and tell her to come over, I instructed my wife, and I let out a shaky breath as the line began to ring, setting wheels of fate into motion that I'd worked hard to keep immobilized for decades. A cheerful voice answered almost immediately, much to my annoyance and dismay. Thank you for calling the Sunrise Meadows Retirement Community Center. My name is Ronald. How may I help you today? His voice was akin to a preschool teacher, which I guess in some ways made perfect sense. I'd like to speak to Greta Biddlespatch, please, if she's available. Not a problem, sir. I'll connect you to a personal line in her room. May I ask who's calling? Ronald chirped. I swallowed hard before answering. Yes, this is her nephew, Gerald. I lied. She'll remember me. That was the Mrs. Biddlespatch special, a chilling reminder that remedies offered freely often come at a price no coin can cover. Tonight, we walked among dying confessions and bottled miracles, each bearing the same fetid scent of secrets too heavy to carry, yet too poisonous to leave behind. If these tales unsettled your heart or whispered to your hidden fears, good. That means the margins are still intact. I am Lucius Voss, your host and conspirator, reminding you to tread carefully through the remnants of the past. Until next Tuesday, keep your lights low, your soap unscented, and your doors locked tight. Good night.